Okay, so we're heading straight into Derry, Maine this time. But not the fun kind of visit, you know? We're tackling it. Chapter 1, the movie that basically made everyone terrified of clowns.
Yeah, it's definitely up there in the Hall of Fame of creepy clowns.
For sure. But before anyone jumps out of their skin thinking about those iconic scenes, I want to be clear. This deep dive isn't about reliving all the jump scares. Nope. We're going way deeper. We're trying to figure out what makes this film work, like on a whole other psychological level, you know?
Totally agree. This isn't just about surface level scares.
Yeah.
Chapter 1, it gets under your skin. And we're gonna unpack that. We're gonna look at everything, the characters, the themes. And luckily, we've got some good source material to work with.
Exactly. Tons of good stuff to unpack there. And I guess a good place to start, I mean, it's got to be Derry itself, right? The town's practically a character in the movie. The source material talks about this whole history of missing kids, and it's not random. It's this terrifying 27-year cycle, like clockwork for something awful. So is this just Stephen King messing with us, or is there something deeper going on?
Well, with Stephen King, I mean, there's always something deeper going on, right? That 27-year cycle, it's clever. It creates this instant feeling of dread, Like this isn't just a one-off monster flick. This is something woven into the fabric of the town.
I see what you mean. It's like the evil's built in.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And this ties into one of King's big themes, that darkness hiding beneath the surface of these normal, everyday towns. You think you know a place, and then
Boom, the sewer clown shows up.
Yeah.
But okay, so how does that idea, this whole cursed town thing, how does that connect to us, to like real life? Why should we care?
Because it taps into that fear of the unknown, right? It's that unease, that feeling like maybe, just maybe the places we think are safe harbor something sinister underneath.
Yeah.
You ever get that feeling? Walking down a street at night and suddenly it feels different, wrong.
Oh, totally. Like your street, your house, suddenly it's not yours anymore.
Exactly. King, he takes that feeling and he amplifies it, makes us question everything.
And speaking of things that make us uneasy, the adults in Derry, they're strangely cool with these disappearances. It's like, oh, another missing kid. That's Derry for you. What's up with that?
That right there, that's a brilliant move by the filmmakers. It immediately makes the kids way more vulnerable. They're surrounded by adults, people who should be protecting them, but they're completely oblivious, almost willfully ignorant to the danger.
Wow. Yeah. It's like the adults are another monster, you know?
And that's a really relatable fear, isn't it? That feeling that the grown-ups in your life, the ones who should be listening, that they don't take your fears seriously.
So true. It's like they dismiss you, like your fears aren't real.
Exactly. And that dismissal just makes the kids' fears that much more powerful. It forces them to rely on each other. Which brings us to the Losers Club themselves. But I think we should save them for after a quick break.
Yeah, let's get back to those kids. We were talking about the Losers Club, right?
Right. The heart of the movie.
Totally. So you've got Bill dealing with the loss of Georgie, Richie always cracking jokes to deflect, Eddie basically swimming in hand sanitizer thanks to his mom. It'd be easy to say, oh, they're just typical movie kids. But the source material points out how each one of them represents something kind of universal.
Yeah, and that's why they work so well as characters. Even if you haven't seen this movie in ages, you remember those kids. Why? Because we were all that awkward kid once.
Right.
Scared of something.
Oh, 100%.
The losers, they're like these walking, talking examples of the fears we all have as kids. Bill, he's faced with loss way too young. Richie, he's hiding behind humor. Eddie's got that overprotective parent thing going on. We see ourselves in those struggles.
Definitely. And that makes it even more powerful when they actually face those fears, right? Because they're not like superheroes. They're just kids finding the courage to deal with this terrifying situation.
Exactly. Their flaws, they actually make their victories more earned. You feel it more. And speaking of victories, the source mentioned this scene where they're all at the quarry just being kids, goofing off, and it's so different from the rest of the movie. What'd you think about that part?
It's like this moment of pure joy in this town that's anything but your joyful. I remember thinking, wait, are they allowed to have fun right now with all the scary stuff happening?
I know, right?
Yeah.
And that's the point. It's this classic horror movie.
Yeah.
You show the audience what the characters stand to lose.
Ah, so when the scary stuff comes back, it hits harder.
Exactly. Those happy moments, they make the scares even scarier because we see what they're fighting to protect. It's not just about surviving Pennywise. It's about saving that piece of childhood, that friendship that lets them face the darkness.
It's true. That scene really shows how vital their bond is, how much they need each other, especially when you're up against, well, a shape-shifting nightmare clown. Which brings us to the main attraction, Pennywise. This is like a masterclass in scaring people. The source material, it describes him not just as a clown, but as this creature that can become your worst fear. One kid sees a leper, another kid, it's a creepy painting coming to life. It's like he sees right through you to the thing you don't want to admit you're scared of.
And that's what makes him such a good horror villain. He's not some guy in a mask. He's like a reflection of our own fears, you know? What
Yeah.
scares you most? Public speaking. Heights. Spiders. Now imagine that fear, but it's alive and coming after you. That's Pennywise. He takes your insecurities and uses them against you.
Okay, now that is terrifying. He's like a walking, talking panic attack, personalized just for you. And speaking of things that make you question reality, I did notice the movie doesn't really explain Pennywise' backstory, not like the book does. Was that a good move, do you think?
You know, for the pacing of the movie, I think it was the right call. King's book, it goes deep into this whole mythology of it.
Oh, yeah, the book is dense.
But by not explaining everything, the movie puts us in the same boat as the characters. We're right there with them, trying to make sense of what's real and what's not. And that just adds to the fear.
Totally. Not knowing can be way scarier than knowing. It's true, sometimes it's better not to know too much, but that kind of brings us to the big question, right? How do you beat something that uses your fear against you? The source material mentions this idea that the kids, they win by being brave, by facing those fears head on. But, and this is a big, but Pennywise doesn't exactly disappear, does he? He's still out there. So, what's the message? Are we just supposed to accept that fear is just a part of life?
That's the thing about fear. It never really goes away, does it? And that's a big reason why chapter one, and honestly, a lot of Stephen King's work is so powerful, I think. It acknowledges that fear is always there, lurking, but it also shows us that fear doesn't have to control us. The Losers Club, they find strength in each other. They have this bond, this friendship, and it lets them find this courage they didn't even know they had.
Yeah. It's like they realize that to stand a chance against something like Pennywise, they got to do it together.
Absolutely. And that's such a powerful message, even coming from a horror movie. It reminds me of that quote, "The only thing we have to fear is fear itself." But it's so much easier said than done.
Right, 100%. It's easy to say be brave, but it's way harder to actually do it, to confront the things that scare us, especially when those fears feel so real, you know?
Exactly, but I think that's what chapter one is really saying. Facing those fears, even if you don't do it perfectly, that's how you take away their power.
Like that scene where they're all in the sewers with Pennywise and they're terrified, but they keep going, they keep fighting. It just gets me every time because it's relatable. We've all had moments where we have to dig deep and find that courage. And sometimes we need a little help from our friends to do it, just like the losers.
Exactly. We need that support system.
Yeah.
And honestly, if there's one thing I hope our listeners take away from this deep dive, it's that horror movies, they can be entertaining, sure, but the really good ones, they stick with us. They tap into something deeper. And chapter one, it works because it shows us that we're not alone in our fears. And when we face those fears together, well, it makes us stronger.
Such a good point. So for our listeners, after this deep dive into it, what's one thing you'd want them to really think about?
I'd probably ask them to think about this. What scared you the most in It? Chapter 1. And I don't mean the jump scares or the creepy visuals. What was it about the story, the characters, even Pennywise himself, that really got to you on a deeper level? Because those fears, the ones that stick with us, those are the ones that tell us the most about ourselves. And maybe, just maybe, if we understand those fears, if we face them head on, we can start to find our way out of the dark.
And hey, even if we're all still a little creeped out by clowns, at least we've got each other, right? This has been an awesome deep dive into the world of It. Chapter 1, thanks for exploring the darkness with us.